It is precisely the mutual understanding between the present and the past, found in Shakespeare's histories, for example, that I find missing in American historical drama. By and large, our playwrights have been historically illiterate. They have known comparatively little about the national narrative, and even less about modes of historical thought. Consequently, they have not served history or society well. Historian Michael Kamen wrote these words in 1978 in his A Season of Youth, The American Revolution and the Historical Imagination. Someone who would have read that at the time certainly isn't in their season of youth now. You can certainly wonder whether America is sadder and wiser now than 45 years ago. Our depictions of the past certainly are, both scholarly and artistic. I've seen two intriguing examples over the past couple months. At first glance, they couldn't be any more different. But is that true? First is Aton Shea's horror film, The Sudbury Devil, about the effects of the brutal conflicts between the Puritan New England colonies and the various native peoples of Dawnland. The Sudbury Devil combines various strands of filmmaking, from the painterly tone poetry and striking imagery of Tom Hooper and Terrence Malick, to the historical accuracy of Peter Weir, to the raw blood and guts of Troma. Not the pieties of prayer that would heave a Puritan heart to the heavens, but blasphemies of every kind to mock the manners of the moralists. It is very dark, which is fine by me. I love the movie. It's tons of fun, filled with plenty of tension and cathartic release of all sorts. Next is the 1812 Underture by the Hysterical Society. The 1812 Underture is an operetta performed at Fort Ontario in Oswego, New York. It combines the lyrical depth of Gilbert and Sullivan with the joyous irreverence of cartoons like Steven Spielberg's Hysteria, the follow-up to Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, and Pinky and the Brain. 1812 is a fun and funny take on the Battle of Oswego in 1814, where the British burned the fort down. Yet despite being technically a tragedy, the characters lose their fort, 1812 maintains a light, fun, breezy tone throughout, all combined with lyrics like this.
The real war is inside your head. It's that existential dread that follows you into bed. The real war is to keep your chin up high when you'd rather break down and cry.
Life is but a systematic transient delusion. None of it means nothing. See, it's not all that confusing. The essence of your being's thus everything with abstractions. So really there's no purpose not to any of your actions.
So really there's no purpose not to any of our actions. I makes me special pudding when the things fall out me owls. On men they wish I wouldn't, greatly distressed and moles.
Full disclosure, I have a connection with both these guys. I attended the premiere of The Sudbury Devil and interviewed Aton Shea Films, and the founders of the Hysterical Society are good friends of mine. Composer Sarah Galvin writes and performs engaging and hilarious songs. And Nick Gentile is an amazing character, beyond being an incredibly creative writer and director. I would know. I worked with him before.
Here comes our intrepid captain, a man of firm leadership, unwavering moral character, and a certain air of what could best be described as quiet dignity.
Look what I found in the latrine! It's another Soviet spy satellite. It's the third one this week. How do you suppose to keep getting our coordinates?
I have no clue.
This is an outrage. Me, a respected, beloved captain harassed by a hostile foreign power.
Such superior craftsmanship.
I was even involved in the research process for the 1812 Underture. So from appearance, these two works could not be more different. Dark and serious horror versus light and fun comedy. Cinema versus operetta. Shrieks of disgust versus shrieks of laughter. Yet they do share some common themes. Neither of them look at a commonly explored or easy narrative period. Not World War II, not the Civil War, not cowboys and Indians, not Prohibition gangsters, or the Salem witch trials, or the founding of Jamestown, or even the Revolution. By avoiding more established settings, both challenge the core patriotic myth of American exceptionalism. They do it by not focusing on the imagined community, not at the massive country itself, that think of textbooks and maps, but at the actual community. Patriotism as pride of place. It is ultimately Sudbury and Oswego that matter. America is just subtext. And for historical projects, that is so refreshing and cool. It's what the future is in so many ways. But I would argue that it is the 1812 Underture that challenges the American patriotic myth much more effectively, both in content and especially tone. The Sudbury Devil feels great, cathartic even, but its very intensity gets in its own way and may undermine its stated goals. In Sudbury Devil, Aton Shea plays around with his relationship with the Puritans. You would think from only this movie that he utterly despises them for their crimes against the Narragansett, Nipmuc, Massachusetts, Wampanoag, and other peoples of the Dawnland. Yet, from personal discussions and his own video on the topic, Aton Shea actually admires how the Puritans contributed to our free society, presumably in contrast to the Anglican absolutism that the Puritans opposed. Playing with paradoxes makes for great filmmaking, great art itself. But one of the underlying messages of the Sudbury Devil is that the Puritans' murderous religious imperialism is a stain on the American nation itself that cannot be washed away even with centuries past. That it brutalizes everyone, regardless of race, gender, or class. A challenging, powerful message. And yet those who most need to hear it would most likely be put off by all the sex, blood, and blasphemy, which admittedly may not have even been the goal. Those who actively complain about cultural subversion may retch at Devil, but Sudbury is not actually a threat to them. It's more a piece of preaching to the choir, which is all fine and good. All cultures and groups create stories for themselves, right? But if the ultimate goal is social change, you gotta at least attract beyond the choir. Get folks outside the church, or at least the Satanic Temple. I love all the sex, violence, and blasphemy, but I'm just one guy. And one last thing. It is still November at this recording, the forgotten holiday month. Thanksgiving produces just the same sort of tired arguing around history that Columbus Day does. The so-worshipped pilgrims were not proto-founding fathers of Enlightenment secularism, and they weren't doing any sort of call to peace at the quote-unquote first Thanksgiving. King Philip's War and the Pequot War before it lay those feel-good lies well low. Yet while King Philip's War specifically has been gaining some attention over the past couple decades, the general concept of early English colonizers being full-on conquerors is a fairly established one, at least in reasonably mainstream quarters. It is generally culturally accepted, if not fully empirically defined. Of course, what separates a history nerd from just someone who wants to live is debatable. But therefore, as peppy and shiny as it may seem, the 1812 Underture is actually the more radical work. It is a much bigger challenge to the standard narrative on American history. Why? How? First, because its setting, the War of 1812 near the northern border, is far less well remembered than even the image of Puritan New England. When you think of the War of 1812, if you do at all, you think of the Battle of New Orleans, the burning of Washington, the defense of Fort McHenry and the Star-Spangled Banner, impressment, free trade and sailors' rights. The Revolution Part 2. Evil Redcoat Empire tries to take America back for Dictator King. If you actually know that the king had fallen to Porphyria by 1811, which is what the Regency is, that's a bonus! Bonus points for British barbarity! Mad King George! How dare they burn places? We Freedonians don't do that! Ever! will be greeted as liberators. They hate us for our freedom. Also, the redcoats look like this. Bad guy countries don't do fashion changes. Okay, I'm done with the silliness. Wait, no, hold on. One last story. I found this doing research. It's an article in a book edited by academic Stephen Conway, who does this sort of thing. So, during the British Chesapeake raids, the ones that got D.C. and almost got Baltimore, these few American guys boarded a British ship looking like this. Parodies of decades-old aristocratic British fashions. Nothing new under the sun. But I mention all this because 1812 Underture doesn't. For all the blue uniforms and tricorn hats, which was a deliberate anachronism, trust me, I bothered them about it. This isn't an act of patriotic joy. No one wants to be at Fort Ontario. No one wants to fight the war. They don't even understand it.
Walls are caving in on Fort Ontario. The situation's grim and our hours dreary. We're weary and we're wounded and the gloom is getting grating as the agony of every day seems to never be abated.
Which is common in art set in the 20th century, Vietnam, especially, even World War II with Catch-22. But for the War of 1812, with the still burning magic time of sacred patriotism of the founding generation, where there's no internal controversy except for, say, slavery and the native peoples, like that's it. In the popular imagination, during the War of 1812, because we were fighting the Redcoats, the fires of revolution still burned. They inspired the war itself. Applying modernist cynicism towards military affairs in the usable past of the revolutionary period is actually an incredibly radical act, and even an accurate one. The War of 1812 was deeply unpopular at the time. Congress's vote for it was a close one, and New England was never on board. It was the historical memory built up after the war that turned it into an extension of the revolution. And that's what the 1812 Underture is really about. Cynicism towards American wars is common now, at least in 2023. But backdating that cynicism over 2 centuries undermines American exceptionalism more than decrying Puritan imperialism ever could. We can other the Puritans to some degree by criticizing the War of 1812, an act committed by the government we still kind of have now. We criticize ourselves so much more. And we criticize ourselves in the past in the same way we have done over the past 20 years. And here's the kicker. Through its form, 1812 Underture hides the power level of its content. Oswego is a reasonably patriotic town, plenty of flags honoring veterans. So I was sure these lyrics would spark a riot.
Roaring tide of patriotism's one effective sales pitch. War is but an enterprise to help the rich and get more rich. As long as there are fighting men, ready, willing, and able, your wealthy overlords will not leave money on the table.
In both performances I saw, no one was bothered by it. Because it was a local show, the house, the open central area of Fort Ontario, was packed. And no one mentioned any discomfort at any of those lines. Everyone who saw 1812 Underture loved it, and no one even mentioned anything I brought up. That is how you change minds. Indirectly, not directly. To be honest, I doubt changing anyone's mind was really Hysterical Society's goal. At least not about American patriotism. About media, about ideas, on the other hand, well, that's different. Sudbury Devil really takes advantage of cinema as a medium to explore ideas through striking images and sounds, which is great. It's cool and fun and entertaining. But it's not really new, per se. Just an apotheosis, a coming together of ideas that are already out there, which is fine and important. 1812 Underture takes advantage of the operetta form, a largely forgotten one, through lyrics. Where else could you hear something like,
Our professional opinion is the problem with these guys is their minds have all been broken by too much access enterprises.
Is our mind. The universe expands at speeds no mortal man can reckon. When you think about it, we grow smaller by the second. To combat insignificance, we've conjured up divinity to help us with the horrors of unthinkable infinity.
Yes, to help us with the horrors of unthinkable infinity.
and that is the cool new thing with real growing potential. And this difference is expressed in the different underlying value sets of these artworks. The Sudbury Devil is the ultimate postmodern work. It deconstructs everything about America itself. But what does it leave us viewers with going forward? What is its recommended path if all are illegitimate and tyrannical? Not much. That's the main weakness of postmodernism. 1812 Underture, on the other hand, is a deeply meta-modern work. What is metamodernism? It is one of the ideologies of the 21st century, made by these guys and plenty of others. It is a reaction to the inconclusive chaos postmodernism causes, offering a path forward, not through force as the modernists do, or mockery and rejection as the postmodernists do, but through a kind of soft, knowing chuckle, embracing all, old and new, in an ironically sincere and or sincerely ironic creation of new work. 1812 Underture is meta-modern in its embrace of local heritage, with a chuckling joy of living, laughing, and loving of place, time, language, and music. It questions everything, but actually destroys nothing, except the fort itself, and then only as an illusion, all the while offering a positive vision of the future, interest, and curiosity. And that, ultimately, is what art about history is for, as well as serving as a canvas for ideas. And for all its excellent distillation of progressive horror cinematic postmodernism, 1812 Underture's ludist metamodernism carries the day. Metamodernism is a deeply therapeutic ideology, far more than postmodernism is. In its intense, mocking criticism, postmodernism is good at finding problems, but not at actually solving them. Metamodernism's goal is to find the solutions to the problems that postmodernism points out. The artist is their society's therapist. Art takes the cognitive dissonance inherent within the society itself and turns it into a cognitive resonance, taking a society's unspoken pain caused by contradictory, deeply held ideas and synthesizing those ideas towards healing. Art about history does its work within a society's past, thus pointing to a better future. Underture Films' The Sudbury Devil rightfully points out all the pain of the nation's past. It rips and tears at it, but its only conclusion is more destruction. The Hysterical Society's 1812 Underture instead offers a more distant, chuckling bemusement as a path to healing an even deeper problem. Michael Kamen defines this even deeper problem in America, deeper than slavery, genocide, racism, imperialism, and sexism. After all, Europeans, and plenty more besides, are guilty of those things too. America's truly unique crime is her mindlessness, her rejection of intellectual life, from which all her crimes and justifications of crimes spread. Crimes including, one only remembered by Canadians and nerds, declaring war on Britain in 1812. That's why, after seeing Sudbury Devil, you should find a way to see 1812 Underture. Sudbury Devil is coming to streaming on Underture's own website soon. Streaming a site-specific operetta is obviously much more complicated. I'm involved in bringing it to more places. Maybe you can help with that. I'm eager to hear the discussions in the comments.